So you may ask, why do you have low back pain? What's up, y'all? It's Christian from TLA Fitness, and today I wanted to do a video on low back pain. In my 10 years as a trainer, low back has been some of the most prevalent issues in our community, so I want to do my part to help solve this issue. And come on, at this point, who doesn't know someone with low back pain? Like, it's such a common thing. More than 50% of the US population either experience or currently have low back issues. I think it's very important that we learn what are current habits we're doing that are encouraging these low back pains, or what are some things we can do to prevent it down the road. So, to understand why we have low back pain, the first thing you got to understand is called the kinetic chain. Kinetic chain just breaks down the different joints in the body and what the sole purpose of that joint is. So as you can see in this picture right here to the side, it goes from mobile to stable to mobile to stable, and you see that it currently just stacks like that, right? It just alternates between mobile and stable. Most of the time, as you can see, your low back pain originates from your lumbar. And what are the most common things that we like to do when we have an injury is we like to focus on that one spot. But 90 to 95% of the time, when you have an injury, it's coming from issues in different areas, and that's just ending up being a cause and effect type of relationship versus like, okay, I have an injury in my low back, so my low back is the place I need to focus on. So the joints I want to focus on here are going to be the hip, the lumbar, and the thoracic. The reason I want to focus on these joints is specifically because you always look at the joint above and below the issue. And seeing that we're talking about the low back, the joints above and below will be the thoracic and it would be the hips. So as you can see, both of those joints are meant to be mobile. We know in today's society, we're more sedentary, right? We're sitting down more, we're not as active, we don't move as much. You know, you can, from your home, you can call a DoorDash, Uber Eats, so you can get food, you can get groceries, you can get pretty much everything without actually leaving your apartment. And obviously, anyone that knows history, it wasn't always like this. This is something that we've changed with technology and with time. So now we're not as active. That goes into my point with your hips, right? So without hips, we're spending a lot more time sitting down, right? So when we sit down, we're gonna have our leg up, right, in this 90-degree angle. So what that ends up doing, it ends up getting that front part of the hip really tight, right? And what ends up happening is when your hip ends up getting really tight, when it comes down to bring back down to normal, it pushes the hips forward. Now my hips is uneven, right? Because my hips is tight in the front here. So now look what it did to my low back. There's an excessive curve in here. Now it's gonna put a lot more pressure into my low back. A lot of these issues come from different body parts. So understanding that, okay, my sedentary lifestyle might be contributing to my back pain is a key thing in understanding your issue and how to solve it going forward. Because you can go to physical therapy all you want, you can work with trainers all you want, but if you're not changing the things in your day-to-day life, then the issue will never go away. So yeah, as we talk again about that hip issue and that excessive curve, this actually has a name. It is called lower cross syndrome. And it's called lower cross syndrome because if you look at it, it's literally going in an X across. The muscles that end up weak are going to be in that cross line, and the muscles that end up overactive and tight are going to be in that cross line. So in this example, we got our hip and we got our low back. And then in this example, we also got our core and our glutes, right? So as we look at that same position, I take my hips and I pull it forward, my core ends up getting elongated, right? My glutes end up getting elongated. And obviously if I'm sitting on it all the time, it's not gonna work. So it's gonna get inactive. And then as you can see here, my low back, the range got smaller, so it got tighter. And the same thing happened in my hip. It got range, got smaller, and it got tighter. So we gotta understand that a lot of these issues come from multiple things, and it's not just one thing. So don't just focus on one muscle. And a good example that I always like to mention with people, what ends up happening is when you go to use, or if you go into the gym and you go to do like an exercise that's supposed to target specifically like your glutes, and you ever feel like you're getting a lot of pain or pressure in your low back, that could be one of the examples right there. It's just that your glutes aren't working and they're not turned on, and you have to use your back to compensate for that. And this is exactly my point, why I say it's important to look at the hip when we look at the kinetic chain, because now The low back is doing the work for the hip because the hip doesn't have any mobility or strength to use it on its own. One thing you ever learn about the human body, it will never stop doing anything. It will just find a different way to do it. And that's how we compensate and learn bad habits and patterns. And that's how we get issues going forward. The next body part I want to focus on is your thoracic spine. So those who've never heard of it, it's also called your T-spine. You'll hear me say that a lot too. The thoracic is important for a lot of these rotational movements that we do. If you're going to lift to pick something up, you go to bend down, and a lot of these movements where you're rotating through your spine. So your thoracic is supposed to be mobile, but just like with your hips, today's modern technology, that's become an issue. Now, if you think about it, right? Thoracic, right? I'm sitting up right here. How is my thoracic affected on a day-to-day basis? Now let's think about this. I'm here on my phone. I'm here on my laptop. I'm here on my desk, right? I'm always in this hunched over position right here. How can I expect this thoracic spine to gain or have the mobility to move fluidly if I'm always in this position right here? I'm always like this. Ends up putting you in a position where you can't effectively rotate and open up. How are you supposed to do a lot of movements if this is locked up? Now, two ways you can hurt your back because of your thoracic. One, let's say you have to reach something high up or above the head. Now, let's say I've been hunched over like this all day, all week, all year, years, plural. Now I go to reach up like here. I don't have the proper range of motion or mobility to open up my chest to reach that tall. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna arch my back. Now all of that pressure is in my low back. Same thing, I go to rotate, I go to bend down to touch something or reach the floor. I don't have the proper rotation through my T-spine, so I'm gonna steal it from my lumbar. How I want you to understand the core concept of your lumbar and how your lumbar works. Think of your lumbar like a tree, right? And when you look at a tree, the thickest and densest part of the tree is the bottom of the tree, right? And that's because it has to withstand the most. It's holding up the most weight, right? And it has to withstand the most, whether it comes wind or storms or things like that. The top of the tree can sway, right? But the bottom of the tree, if the bottom of the tree starts swaying, you have a problem. That tree's most likely going to come down. Think of your lumbar as the bottom of a tree. Think of your spine as the tree, right? So your lumbar is the thickest part of your spine for that reason. You have support from your hips below. You have support from your rib cage above. Your spine right here, think about it. It's all just organs and all that stuff right here. This thing is holding up everything above here, right? There is no support around it. So that's why also it's important to strengthen your core. But that's why your lumbar spine is so thick, is because it's holding up and supporting the most. So there's not supposed to be a lot of movement and range of motion in your lumbar spine. You're only technically supposed to have about 10 to 15 degrees of rotation in your lumbar spine. Most of it, again, like I said, has to come from the thoracic, or if you're going through the hips, you don't really want to be doing it a lot through the lumbar. The real question is, how do you fix it? Now, I want to break down a 4-step process to fixing your low back pain. The first one is called Inhibit. Inhibit are self-myofascial release tissue work, all these different things like that. So whether you're using a foam roller, whether you're getting massage, you're doing cupping, all these different things are just called, soft tissue work. When certain muscles get tight, certain muscles get relaxed. The tight muscles, you want to loosen those tight muscles up so that it's not as tense and it's not as tight, so it'd be a little bit more fluid from motions, right? And it'll be able to open up a little bit more. So some areas that you would want to do that with, as we have the beautiful fire truck. Listen, it wouldn't be New York City if we didn't hear at least one siren. We're going to work on the hips, right? We're going to do a lot of the front of the hips. We're going to do a lot of the quads, whether that's foam roll, self-myofascial release, the trigger point guns, the Theraguns that people have. All these little things also help in these areas. So you're going to do your quads, you're going to do your hips. You can do a little bit of stuff in your low back. I wouldn't spend too much time in your low back, especially things around your spine. I would do more of a muscle that's called your QL. So your QL, a good way to find it, if you make an L and you go from your spine to your hip, that area in between here, right, that is not on your spine, is an area that I would definitely trigger point, get a ball, put it up against that area, loosen that up a little bit, because that tends to get a little tight if you sit down a lot, or if you have that lower cross syndrome that I talked about. That would be an issue too. So also your lats for some people who doesn't know, you know, your lat starts here, goes into here, goes around and into the opposite glute. So one lat starts here and ends here, and the opposite one goes around. So you can see it goes all the way into your lower back. So it's going to be a key muscle. It's a muscle that's commonly very tight in people. And as you can see, it goes all the way into your lower back. So 1 + 1 = 2. So these are some of the muscles I would definitely focus on. I would always focus on the chest. You know, if someone has like a bad posture, they generally need to open up this way. And if you have a good line of posture, it will generally put some less stress on joints, which will alternatively help with low back issues. The second step that you're going to hit next is lengthening. And lengthening is basically stretching. It's elongating the muscles. So why do you stretch after you do inhibit? I say it just simply because these muscles are tight and tense. And if you try to stretch tight and tense muscles, you won't have that as much relaxed lengthening period and process. It'll be a lot more tense, and it won't be prone to want to open up as much. And if you do a little bit of inhibiting, you'll allow that to open up a little bit more. And with doing that, it will then allow you to now be able to stretch and open up a little bit more. And you're gonna do that with the same muscles you just did the first round with. So it's gonna be the same things as a 1-2 punch. So the third thing that you're gonna do after you've done those first two is called activation. Activation is very common in PT world. And if you work with any corrective exercise specialist, these are like a lot of those exercises you do when you go to PT, or if you've ever seen people do like those band work and all this little band exercises and these lateral band and all these little band works you see in PT, those are activation, because what that is trying to do is just trying to open up and turn on the muscles that's been dormant or been underactive or underused by the other muscles. So case in point, we just talked about the glutes. This is why when people generally go to PT, they're generally doing exercises that turn their glutes on. It's a very common thing. And they're doing exercises that turn their hamstring on, and they're doing exercises that turn their core on, because these are things that's been affected by your low back pain and are generally underactive. So we have to then turn these on in order to make sure that your issue gets better. So strengthening through activation, proper activation, things like glute bridges, clamshells, things like that, planks. These are activation exercises that can definitely help you with your low back issues. So the last and final of the 4 steps that you have to do is integrate. Integrate is now we've done those first 3 steps. We've loosened up, we've opened up the tight muscles. We've then turned on and activated the inactive muscles. So now you have to get the body back used to doing proper movement. So what happens when you suffer any injury or pain, your body gets accustomed to adapting and doing a movement pattern to kind of fit the issues. So like if you have back pain and you've been squatting and your back has been an issue, you might start leaning forward. Jesus Christ, bro. Get the, damn it. Yeah, if you have low back pain and that might be an issue, when you go to squat, you might start of leaning forward. So now we have to relearn these movement patterns with the proper technique so that your body gets used to doing things right. So after you've done all these activities, that now when you go back and you start to do regular everyday things, you're not going back to doing the same old patterns you've been doing before. And that's just something you would work out either with a trainer or with a PT. It's a couple different exercises depending on your issue, so I don't want to subscribe anything personally, but it's just a concept that I want you to understand so you know that there are multiple steps to this layer. This is going to be a mental challenge more than it is a physical one. The thing when it comes to pain and issues with a lot of pain, especially low back pain, it can be prevalent with all the activities you do throughout your day, right? So it becomes frustrating, it becomes mentally draining. It's easy to be down and depressed when you're going through these things. You got to understand, when you're going through this process, it is going to be about consistency. You have to understand, like, a lot of these issues took months, years to develop. So doing something for a month, you can expect your low back just to be 100% after that. You have to understand it's going to take some time for you to develop the right technique and skill and strength in the right places in order for you to get to that point where you're gone with this low back pain. So just be consistent, stick to it. I know it can get a little boring at times. That's fine. Listen, if you got to do something boring every once in blue to get to your end goal, then that would be fine. Hey, if I told you, if you just worked on something for years straight, you could be at the top of your career field, no one would hesitate. No one would hesitate. But when it comes to something with our body, which I think is more important than your career, we want to hesitate with a lot of this grind and hustle. So we have to change our mindset and change our viewpoint on what we're doing and why we're doing. Always remember your why. Your why is what's going to drive you every day. Your why is what's going to drive you when you don't want to do it. Just always remember your why. Always remember why you're doing it. Whether it's you want to play with your kids or grandkids, or you just want to have a functional life with no pain. It could have multiple different whys. It's okay. As long as it's personable to you and you have a passion and it drives you, use that to carry you on throughout the day. Also, what I want you to think about is just look at your daily habits. You know, I mentioned this before. Like, if you're going through this situation and you're working through your daily habits, like, see what are you doing throughout the day that might be causing some of these issues. But a lot of people, you'll like to see, I'm going to step back so you can see this, they like to lean into one hip, right? They like to carry a bag on one side. We have a lot of poor habits we do throughout the day that leads to a lot of these issues and pain. What I would suggest is, while you're going through this journey, and even if you haven't started yet, just look at some of the things you do throughout the day that might be causing a lot of these issues and start to kind of see, like, this might be playing into it, and then try to switch some of these patterns. Case in point, I live 2 floors below the roof. So instead of me just coming up here and taking the elevator, I took the steps. It's just little things you could do throughout your day, you know, and instead of me sitting down and doing this video, I'm doing it standing up. So there's a bunch of things you could do throughout your day as a daily pattern to help you through a lot of these issues. It's TLA Fitness, Christian. I'm here back with another video on low back pain. I'm looking forward to doing a lot more videos to help you get through life and become a better person and a better human being. And I'm here to do it with you together. But until then, y'all have a great day. Enjoy the weather, and y'all have a great night.